My name is Eleanor Morgan. I'm 72 years old. And this past winter, over eggs Benedict and lukewarm coffee, my daughter-in-law looked at me and said, "We've decided not to invite you for Christmas." She said it as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. My son David sat next to her, eyes cast down at his napkin, silent. I didn't ask why. I didn't flinch. I just nodded and took another sip of my cappuccino. It was easier than letting the ache show. We were sitting at Willowhearth Cafe, the same corner table we always took before the holidays. So the brick walls were dressed in pine garlands, golden string lights curled around the windows. The whole place smelled like cinnamon and wood polish. But that morning, it all felt cold. I'd arrived early like always. I ordered a cappuccino and a slice of cranberry walnut bread. Same as every December. Ellie, the young waitress with the short curls and kind eyes, didn't even need to ask. She smiled when she set the plate down, said, "Good to see you, Miss Eleanor." It was the only warmth I felt that morning. When David and Hannah arrived, I thought maybe they had a surprise for me. Maybe Clara, my granddaughter, had made another ornament for the tree. But no. What they brought was a decision clean, final, and wrapped in politeness. "We just thought we'd try something simpler this year," Hannah said. "Clara's getting older and needs her own space. Jonah's still little, so he won't really notice." I nodded again, not in agreement but to make the moment end. My cranberry bread went untouched. My cappuccino cooled beside it. I reached into my purse, pulled out the exact change, and placed it gently beside my plate. "I assume I'm paying for myself," I said. No one stopped me as I stood. No one asked if I was all right, and as I walked out of that cafe, coat wrapped tight, I realized something. I wasn't leaving because I was angry. I was leaving because the script had changed and no one had saved me a line. The air outside bit at my cheeks as I stepped onto the salted sidewalk. I didn't rush. There was nowhere to be. Cars passed slowly through the slush-covered streets. Children tugged mittens and mothers carried bags of ornaments and paper. Everyone looked like they had somewhere to return to. Everyone but me. I walked past the bookstore I used to take David to when he was 8. He loved the ceiling map, used to stare at it while I browsed the sales shelf. That map was still there, but now a sign hung in the window, 60% off. Moving soon. Another thread pulled loose. That bookstore had been mine once, not by ownership but by presence. I knew the aisles. I knew the owner's cat. I knew the way the door creaked a little too loud, but like so many things I quietly built my life around, it was slipping away. Just like my seat at the holiday table. There is a strange kind of hollow that comes from realizing your presence no longer fits into other people's plans. It doesn't stab you. It doesn't even bruise. It just passes through you, like air. Like you're not even there. I kept walking. Past the bakery where I once ordered birthday cakes for Clara. Past the florist where I used to buy poinsettias for Hannah each December. None of them knew me anymore. Or maybe they did, but I wasn't in the story now, not this year. The world didn't push me away. It just kept moving and didn't look back. That was the part that hurt the most. Not being left behind, but being forgotten. My hands trembled slightly as I reached into my bag for my car keys. Not from age, but from something more subtle. Something that comes when your body tries to make sense of quiet rejection. Like your blood is trying to remember the rhythm of being needed. David hadn't defended me. He hadn't said a word. Maybe he thought I was too strong to be hurt. Maybe he thought staying quiet was keeping the peace. But peace without presence isn't peace at all. It's erasure. For years I gave up my seat, gave up the bigger slice of cake, made dinner without onions because Hannah was allergic, to wrapped presents with more care than I wrapped myself. And I never asked for anything back. I thought being easy to please would make them want me around. Turns out it just made me easier to dismiss. And as I stood at that curb, watching families gather through frosted windows, I knew this much. I wasn't part of the picture anymore. Not because I didn't belong, but because I was no longer seen. When I got home, the apartment was still and dim. The radiator hissed gently. A faint scent of lavender hung in the air, left over from the drawer sachets I used to replace every season. So I slipped off my coat, hung it by the door, and stood in the hallway for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Then, like I always did in early December, I pulled down the attic ladder. Even if I wasn't invited, the box was waiting, same as it had every year. The Christmas box sat in the corner, wrapped in faded tape and a red ribbon I'd reused more times than I could count. The first carried it down, step by step, careful not to bump it against the railing. It creaked when I set it on the dining table, like a voice saying, "You're still here." Inside were ornaments wrapped in old newspaper, yellowed and soft at the edges. A few had cracks now. Some had lost their shimmer. But they were mine, each one with a memory. The wooden reindeer David made in 3rd grade. The tiny stocking I embroidered with Clara's name the year she was born. At the bottom of the box were the sprigs of dried pine I'd tucked away for scent. I pressed one to my nose, still faintly sharp, still a trace of something alive. There was no tree this year, no dinner plan, no children laughing in the hallway. But still, I wiped each ornament gently with a dry cloth, as if they deserved care, even if no one would see them. I used to do this with joy. Now I did it out of habit. Not once in all these years had anyone said, "We'd love for you to come." Not once had they asked, "What dish would you like to bring?" I was never really invited. I just showed up, because I thought that's what mothers did. I wrapped the gifts weeks in advance. Scarves for Clara, always soft because she hated itchy sweaters. A Lego set for Jonah, he liked the ones with police cars. For David, a wool scarf and a Home Depot gift card, every year, tucked in a plain envelope. He never opened it in front of me. No one ever said thank you. But I didn't wait for it. I thought remembering them was enough. I never realized I was teaching them to forget me in return. And maybe the most dangerous tradition is the one where we love people without ever asking if they still want us close. The attic box didn't complain. It never did. But this year, as I folded the old tissue paper and placed it back inside, I whispered quietly to no one at all, "This isn't how I want to be remembered." I was an accountant for 37 years. Numbers were my language. I knew how to balance books, track every cent, ensure nothing fell through the cracks. But I had never applied that same precision to my own life, not until that week. That morning, I cleared the old maplewood table in my apartment. Its surface was scratched in places, especially where I dropped a ceramic plate last Christmas. I set down my tablet, a red pen, and a fresh cup of black coffee. And then I opened the bank statements. Not to blame, not to accuse, just to understand. I created a simple spreadsheet, one row for each item, columns by year. At the top I wrote, what I've given. Internet for David's house, $200 a month for 4 years. Hannah once said, just keep it in your name so it doesn't get shut off. I don't remember if I nodded or just stayed quiet. Total, $9,600. Then the basement flood. I handled the insurance, paid up front while they sorted things out, $14,500. Down payment for Hannah's new car when Clara started school, $6,200. Summer enrichment classes for Clara, $1,800. Emergency room bill when Jonah had a high fever 2 winters ago, $3,200. And that wasn't counting the groceries I dropped off, the electric bills I quietly covered when their balance ran low, or the dozens of small Amazon charges that somehow always appeared near birthdays and holidays. I stared at the final number, $276,800. It wasn't the money that stunned me. It was that I'd survived giving it away. Not comfortably, not proudly, just barely, like someone crossing a frozen lake and only realizing how thin the ice was once they've reached the other side. I had never asked for repayment, not even acknowledgement. My kindness was quiet. My support invisible. But somewhere along the line they started seeing it as expected, not generous, just standard. I'd become the family foundation they never thought to thank. I picked up the phone and called the law office I'd used for years. I'd like to stop all recurring transfers, I said, and I want to review every authorization with my name on it. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was just steady. That afternoon, I walked to the local diner, the kind with round steel tables and peppermint tea that still comes in real mugs. Silas was already there, his silver hair now whiter than I remembered. We'd worked together on a few nonprofit audits after retirement. I heard you're redoing your will, he said as I sat down. I nodded. It's time I redefined what my share really means. Silas didn't ask questions. He just passed me a slip of paper with something handwritten on it. They didn't exclude you because you didn't matter, it read. They excluded you because they assumed you'd always be there. I smiled, just faintly. Maybe I had been too present for too long. Maybe it was time to become visible again by stepping away. I didn't leave in anger. That part always surprises people. I left because I had stayed too long in a place where my presence was taken for granted. And that realization didn't come with fireworks or shouting. It came like winter itself, quiet, steady, undeniable. I returned home after the meeting with Silas and opened my file cabinet. 3 folders sat neatly inside, each labeled with someone else's name. David, Clara, Jonah. I added a 4th. It said, Eleanor. Then I transferred $12,000 into a savings account under my own name. Not for emergencies, not for anyone else, just for me. It felt strange, almost selfish. But then again, it also felt like air after too many days in a windowless room. No one knew. No one needed to. That evening, I packed a small overnight bag, a few warm sweaters, my winter boots, a book one hadn't yet finished, and the keys to the lake cabin, the one tucked deep in the woods outside of Willowbrook. It used to be our holiday escape. Now it would be mine alone. As the snow started falling, I drove slowly. The cabin sat near the edge of Pinywood Lake, where the water turns to glass in December, and the wind hums against the evergreens. When I stepped inside, the scent of old cedar and unused fireplace swept over me like a memory. Nothing had changed. No one had come here since last winter. I lit a fire with the old newspaper still stacked near the hearth. The flames took their time, like they were remembering how to warm someone again. I sat on the floor and listened to the creaking wood, the quiet crackle of heat catching. This place had once held children's laughter, spilled cocoa, wet socks near the heater. Now it held only me. And for the first time in a very long while, that was enough. I didn't leave a note. Didn't send a message. I simply chose not to be in a room where no one noticed I was already fading. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is not shouting to be seen. It's walking away in silence and choosing to belong to yourself again. The next morning, I stepped outside and pulled in a long breath of cold pine air. It smelled like snow and earth and something softer, maybe freedom. The cabin creaked gently in the wind, like it was adjusting to having someone inside again. I wandered down the trail toward the old farmer's market at the edge of the woods. It was quiet this time of year, just a few vendors keeping their stalls open under humming space heaters. I bought a bag of golden apples. At the baked goods table, a familiar face turned toward me. Eleanor Morgan, she said, squinting. Is that you? It was Colleen Myers. We had gone to high school together, exchanged holiday cards once or twice before losing touch. Word in town was that her son tried to sell her house out from under her. She took him to court and won. I kept the house, she said, grinning as she held up a bag of abalistries. But I couldn't keep the silence. I knew exactly what she meant. We walked back to the cabin together, our boots crunching softly over the snow-packed trail. I made us hot cocoa, the old-fashioned way, with dark chocolate shavings and a pinch of cinnamon. She sat on the front steps, hands curled around the warm mug like someone who used to garden every morning. Neither of us asked about children, or holidays, or why we were spending this December in solitude. We didn't need to. At a certain age, explanations don't soften the ache, they sharpen it. She stared out toward the lake, now frozen under a thin layer of ice. You can live alone, she said, but the absence of footsteps still echoes. I nodded. When the heater kicks in at night, it makes the same sound my son's laughter used to. Not because it's warm, but because it's not his voice at all. We sat like that, quiet and still, 2 women who had spent decades giving everything to others and were now learning how to keep something for themselves. I told Colleen the story of the cabin, how my husband had built it after our 2nd anniversary, how David once broke his arm climbing the tree out back, how I blamed the woods for a while but always came back. Colleen smiled. Kids never take care of what they didn't pay for. I laughed softly. We keep it not to hold it against them, but to hold on to the parts of us we left behind. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some sentences are written only for the person who says them. When she left, she waved and said nothing more. And I didn't feel alone. Because some people don't need promises to return. They just know when it matters. It was 3 days before Christmas when I saw the sub. Parked just outside the gate of the cabin, engine still running, windows fogged from the inside. Silver gray. Same license plate David had picked out when he got his promotion in 2018. I didn't rush to the window. I didn't hide either. I just stood there, teacup warm in my hands, letting the quiet speak first. After a moment, the doors opened. Hannah stepped out first, holding a box wrapped in red ribbon. David followed, slower. And then Clara wearing a red hoodie, clutching something round made of pine branches and yarn. I opened the door just wide enough. "There's coffee," I said. No hugs. No, we've been so worried. No explanations. Just the sound of boots on snow and the creak of the floor as they stepped inside. Hannah placed the gift box on the table without saying a word. David looked around like he was visiting a childhood memory that no longer recognized him. Clara stood quietly near the fireplace, eyes on the small tree I'd decorated with paper boughs and pine cones from the backyard. Hannah broke the silence. "I know it was sudden when you left. I thought maybe you just needed space. But Clara missed you." I looked at Clara. She didn't speak. She just placed a handmade wreath on the table. Wire, ribbon, 2 uneven paper snowflakes taped to the sides. David sat down across from me, his voice low. "You leaving, it made me feel lost." I didn't flinch, just sipped my tea. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just don't live by instructions anymore." They didn't argue. They didn't defend. Because deep down they knew. I had finally started choosing myself. They left without asking if I'd return. I didn't walk them to the door. I stayed seated, hand resting on the edge of the table, listening to the crunch of their boots fade into the snow. Before the car pulled away, I looked through the frosted window. Clara turned her head. She smiled. It was the kind of smile once had at 11, hopeful and unsure all at once. I didn't know if it was meant for me. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. A week later, I returned to Page Pine, the little bookstore tucked at the corner of town where everything moved slower, softer. Evelyn, the owner, waved as I walked in. "Ellie," she said like she'd been waiting for me. "We were hoping you'd come back." I brought a basket of cinnamon cookies and a worn copy of A Winter Tale. The children sat in a circle on the rug near the fogged-up window, holding cocoa in both hands, their eyes wide with quiet wonder. I told them a story about a woman who lived alone in the forest. She wasn't a witch. She wasn't a fairy. She was just someone who had once been forgotten, but who found peace by lighting her own fire. They didn't ask if she had grandchildren. They just asked, "Will you tell another one?" Later, Evelyn handed me a small card. "We'd like to make it official, storyteller in residence, Mary Eleanor Morgan." I smiled not because of the title, but because it was the first time my name appeared without roles attached. No mom, no grandma, just Ellie. And maybe that's enough. Maybe, after all these years of being everything to everyone, I finally remembered who I am to myself.